Welcome to No Cold War's Perspectives. I'm your host, Charles Xu, with No Cold War and Tau Collective. And today we are turning to the belly of the beast, the United States, where the Trump administration's crackdown on dissent over the US-backed Israeli genocide in Gaza has reached unprecedented heights. Just days ago, Israel's so-called Gideon's Chariot operation shocked observers worldwide. The Zionist regime is now overtly seeking the full conquest of Gaza with the assent of Trump, who reneged on a direct agreement with the Palestinian resistance to secure the entry of aid into the besieged and starved Strip. The move has triggered a fresh wave of protests across the United States, coinciding with the 77th anniversary of the Nakba, demanding an end to all support for the Israeli regime until it lifts the blockade and returns to the ceasefire terms that the US itself helped broker in January. Now, with Trump's campaign of repression continuing unabated against the Palestine Solidarity Movement, the United States stands at a crossroads, not only for its own political future, but for the wider movements that have given life to this movement. I'm joined today by Jodie Evans, a co-founder of CODEPINK, who has been organizing tirelessly against the genocide and US imperialism at large from Los Angeles and within the halls of power in DC. Many international observers were surprised by Trump's continued full-throated backing for the Israeli genocide, even as signs of a rupture began over, for example, Yemen, or negotiations with Iran, or direct talks with the Palestinian resistance. Can you help listeners understand what has led to this moment and what the impact of recent events has been domestically for the Palestine Solidarity Movement?
Well, so Trump is always trying to create a mess. He thrives on chaos. And so all the spheres of power that have, I want to say this goes all the way down to the humans who live not just in the United States, but globally, it's chaos. And so creating other alliances, destabilizing those that think they are powerful is his play toy. So that's what we're watching. He's looking for where there are other pockets of power to destabilize Netanyahu, and yet he's fickle. And the hard thing is no one is really stopping Netanyahu. And we saw that yesterday. I think it was yesterday. The days are so strange. When after 500,000 in the streets in London and 100,000 at The Hague in red, 3 countries finally say something, meaningful against what Israel was doing. Bibi's immediate response is, the same horrible limp tropes that we've heard over these last 18 months, and thinking that he's still going to get away with murder. He's going to get away with murder until he doesn't, and no one has been able to figure out how to stop him. My heroes forever will be the Houthis, because they stand up to the bully and don't stop, but they have their lives to lose, but they model courage for the whole world, as Chariot does in Burkina Faso. That we're looking to these places where we can see courage modeled in the face of absolute horror, stupidity, the psychopathic human that emerges in late stage capitalism. I don't think any of us were prepared for. Not only who they are, how they speak, their dehumanization, but what they are capable of. And what we have to witness in Gaza every night, from, to me, the very beginning, I couldn't handle babies being killed in an incubator. That was beyond what my psyche could handle. And that every day our psyches are pummeled with more death and violence than live stream. And your job as someone inside the belly of the beast, someone who's an ally with the Palestinians, someone who you must do all they can to call it this moment of sharing each day what is happening. I only know that I survived because of the movement I am part of, and that we're in the streets every day, and that we are doing all we can. Because this level of dehumanization insane violence is not, it's affecting all of us. And we don't know what that means. But what I see around me, which is where I work as an activist, is that the stability that is being built over the last 18 months of a movement that, can watch what England and France is doing, can watch what's happening with Qatar, and, hear all the stories, but stays very committed to the work of building a movement, the work of taking care of each other, the work of raising up the story, the work of scratching at power in every way they can, the work at scratching at those that serve Zionism and serve violence. And that helps keep the sanity and build the future. I think, we're watching a horrible moment in history. While doing that, while being in service, we need to be building the future, because this destabilization is cracking open the violent empire that has been there, that, we've seen and you and I talk about, but that others don't. It started really October 8th, where people were watching, trying to learn, where the curtains just got pulled back of Oz, pulled back. Things have been happening, but there's nothing in the way. And you either put your head in the sand or you wanted to learn. And, one of the things that we do is show up where there are people showing up, not necessarily for Palestine, but for what is happening. The ground under my feet is going away. I need stability. I show up in community and teaching. And I would say, what we need to be doing more than anything is teaching, because even in the halls of Congress, CODEPINK has been in the halls of Congress every day since October 8th and before. But, people are showing up for this horror, but don't understand the structures they live in, don't understand the full picture. They can be against what's happening to Palestine and, believe we need to go to war on China or think NATO's a good thing. So we find that our work is in education. I mean, we're going to launch a podcast about NATO because no one knows what NATO is, except that they get sold that it's a good thing and it's, creating security. Or China. And, Charles, you and I have been working for the last 5 years. And since literally 5 years ago of launching China's Not Our Enemy, for the first time in polls, the China as the enemy has decreased. Now it's still a horrible number. It went down from 81 to 77. But I think that's what's happening. I think it reflects that the propaganda is not working, even as we move into this time of AI and the propaganda is thick. But, I want to talk about how and where the propaganda is failing. This empire spends billions of dollars. The Zionist lobby spends billions of dollars to affect thinking, to create these propagandas and these structures of lies that people are imprisoned in. But there's these, I call them whistleblower because whistleblowers are my favorite thing. And I made a movie about Daniel Ellsberg because of what I saw in Iraq, and that nobody would listen to peacemakers, but I knew they would listen to a whistleblower. Well, we're in a time of very interesting whistleblowers because they're just human. They're whistleblowers from inside of humanity. And my favorite new whistleblower is Miss Rachel, who is in the United States. She's a teacher of mothers of small children. She's the Mr. Rogers or the Muppets of our time. And that she could look at what's happening and call it what it is. That's the whistleblower. That she could say to, how can anyone kill a child? Something you and I would think is obvious, but that this woman could say it and not be shut down, not be, said like me that you're funded by the Chinese Communist Party, so trying to denigrate what my words are, or you're a peace activist, or you work for Hamas, but a woman who just is teaching children. it has disrupted the narrative. And not only so, but, as we do in nonviolent direct action, by being that, we expose the violence. Well, she's exposed the violence profoundly because she's been attacked as saying, oh, we cannot kill children. And that plays with the minds of people who aren't in the political system, who don't understand what's happening, but it's woken them up. She's been this Pied Piper into what's happening that's quite amazing. And we see it, the same thing happened with China, where TikTok, the attempt to ban TikTok, which wasn't about China at all, it was about Palestine. It was about the fact that information about Palestine wasn't being censored, like at Twitter, like at Facebook. And people were, young people especially, were seeing what was really happening. And this wasn't okay with the Zionists. So they had to close down TikTok, which, needed to be used as like China's our enemy. We have to get rid of this. They're in your brains. And Americans said, I'm just going to go to China and get on their social media. And they went on Red Note. And what did they discover? That their government had been lying to them. That China's amazing. And not only that, China has more than they have. And this opening up of the bars of violence and propaganda and lies is happening. And our task is to be there, to be teaching, to be helping. We lived in the uncertainty, the space of possibility. So the space of uncertainty and the ground under people's feet is just unraveling. And to be able to then bring firm ground of certainty, of teaching, of knowledge, of actual learning and history that people can stand on and find solace in, including the communities of people who are working for humanity, who are saying the words of how do we care for each other? How do we care for those across the globe? How do we be one world, related to an earth that we need to be taken care of? That's a whole new world is opening up that needs us, all at the same time, where people are being enormously courageous. And yet there's many who can't be because their lives are at threat. When you look at the prisons in El Salvador, you look at the threat of sending people to Libya, that's real. That's horrific. That's unthinkable. Yet some people have to find ways to take care of members of their community that need to be cared for. So all of this teaches, and that's the moment I find us in, is where we, as a movement, and the movements across the world, with the courage, with the teaching, with the caring, are creating stability in, Trump does his best to create the most chaos, the most instability. We see it in the White House. We see the pitting of people who hate each other against each other, and the pulling one in and the pulling the other in and shaming the other. Right now, Congress is considering this new $1 trillion military budget that is being driven by the war on China. We've got China hawks, the White House full of them, horrific China hawks. We had Tulsi Gabbard, the head of intelligence, downgrade the threat of climate chaos and upgrade the threat of China. So, we constantly have our work cut out for us in teaching. But what I see is that humanity, those that are still in relationship with it, become the greatest teachers because they ask the questions in such a fresh way. I mean, Speed, I forgot his name. He's a TikTok influencer, a Black, I think, hip hop artist who went to China, and millions of people exposed how amazing China is. Well, that's the way to learn, is that's the teaching. So I watch, the US Congress voting billions of dollars for propaganda, and the cracks open, and that just be a waste. So that creates this possibility for us to be available. We find ourselves in so many places where people just want to understand, just want to know. A recent poll came out that showed that 71% of Democrats, this is the thing that they agree on most, is that we must stop sending weapons to Israel. More than climate change, more than immigration, this is the thing they agree on most. And those in power are doing the opposite. I mean, I think it's 7 in 10 Democrats are say no more weapons, while I think 14 in 50 Democratic senators were a yes vote on Bernie's bill. So the discrepancy between those in power and the people is huge. And not only is it huge, but it's seen. It's seen and it's felt. It's talked about. You know, America's horrible. Nobody talks about politics, but that we're watching the talk about politics arise again. And it's a deeper understanding of the violent imperialist structures that is the United States. And not that anyone has the answers, but they're asking the questions, which lead, I believe, to further answers. I mean, I'm always teaching that we live in a war economy, and the first thing you have to do is break the addictions that the war economy forces on you and practice peace economy habits. And we say that at CODEPINK that we need to be practicing every day the muscles of engagement, working strategically, being committed, having courage, being in the streets every day, working together in community. Those are the things that we need to be practicing, and those give us the structure that we can be standing on as all this cracks apart. And then, the other thing, and Charles, you and I live in Los Angeles, and we lived through these fires, and I learned from what's happening with climate change. It's fast and it's furious, and preparation is necessary. And we did prepare in LA with lots of local peace economy projects that could move people into engagement and serve communities. It could have been much more traumatic without that. And so those hurricanes last week across the Midwest, it's fast and it's furious, and that we need to be prepared, creating the soil, the ground for the future, and keep out of the circus that is Trump, and be, educating.
Thank you so much, Jodie, for those insights and for giving us such a comprehensive picture of the scope of CODEPINK's work, all the different fronts of anti-militarist and anti-imperialist struggle that's fighting on, all the different tactics from direct action to education, and really grounding us in the reality that what's happening here in the United States isn't just about these machinations in the halls of power. It isn't just about these great power politics happening at the leadership level between the U.S., its proxies like Israel and other countries. It is about these popular movements, these grassroots popular movements like CODEPINK, which are grounded within a thoroughly anti-imperialist and internationalist analysis, and really part of this global movement for peace. So yeah, again, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure our global audience at No Cold War will be following what CODEPINK and the rest of the peace movement in the US is up to closely in the weeks and months ahead. So with that, you have been listening to No Cold War Perspectives, where we bring you the pulse of struggles for sovereignty, justice, and peace worldwide. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay in solidarity. You can follow us at any of the links in the show notes below.